Hello, everyone. Scientists have discovered that quantum theory can be used to transfer skills from one brain to another, and they've openly shared this groundbreaking technology. Today, we're recapping the story of the 2015 film Mind Gamers. Kreutz, dressed in a priest's robe, kneels before a massive mural of Christ. Monsignor Mosca approaches and orders him to stand. Mosca mentions that people are discussing Kreutz's work. Kreutz defends himself, stating that physics and faith are interconnected, adding that religion is dying, but his research can help revive it and bring people back to the church. Mosca then cryptically mentions records from an orphanage and orders Kreutz to open a door. Inside, they see Kreutz's assistants gathered around something. When they step aside, Mosca is shocked to find a child wired to a machine. Startled, he clutches the cross around his neck. As he rushes toward the child, Kreutz's assistants restrain him, and Kreutz strikes him twice with his staff, causing him to fall. The young bioengineers then introduce themselves: Dylan, Agnes, Maddie, Rollo, and Jackson. They are all students at DXM Academy, founded by Kreutz, and each receives a chip implanted in their necks. Jackson, working at his computer, dismisses a man's call for help and leaves. The next scene shows Agnes waking up as an alarm goes off. Jackson makes his way through sleeping students, waking Dylan and Rollo along the way, and heads to his office. There, he notices a spot of blood on the floor and bends down to examine it, just as the assessor walks in. The assessor questions Jackson's choice of team members, and Jackson explains his decisions. He selected Rollo for his lab expertise and Dylan for his skill with emotional mapping. The assessor refers to them as deviants and devourers. Jackson continues by explaining why he chose Maddie and Agnes. The assessor concludes his questioning by saying that they trust Jackson, which is why he was granted authorized access. Jackson and Dylan then watch a video of an experiment conducted at a U.S. military base where one man successfully controls another's brain. Back at the academy, the team gathers around Voltaire, a paralyzed dancer who will be the subject of their experiments. Jackson instructs Voltaire to raise his hand using only his mind, but the attempt fails. The scene shifts to the assessor informing Jackson that the academy's management is growing impatient after 2 years without results. Agnes is seen watching a colony of bats fly overhead, descending near her. Dylan approaches, and she rummages through his pockets, pulling out what appears to be a drug sachet. Maddie steps in and takes it from her. In a private conversation, Rollo tells Jackson that Agnes won't pass the security checks because of the drugs. He also notes that security at the academy has never been this strict, suggesting something important is happening, given the full biometric scans. Jackson reassures Rollo that Agnes will be fine. They proceed through the security gate, with Jackson leading the way. The others anxiously watch as Agnes crosses the checkpoint and successfully joins them. They then notice a security guard approaching, but instead of stopping them, the guards are clearing a path for someone significant. The person, wearing a black hood, is seated in a wheelchair pushed by Monsignor Mosca. All the students assemble in a lecture hall, where Da Silva, a staff member of the academy, introduces Gabriel Kreutz. Mosca wheels the hooded figure onto the stage. When the hood is removed, Kreutz reveals a gold mask covering the lower part of his face. As he begins his speech, Kreutz suddenly shows signs of discomfort in his abdomen, and though Mosca moves to assist, Kreutz declines. Mosca instead pushes him from one side of the stage to the other. Kreutz introduces his invention, N.Och, pronounced Enoch, a machine that functions like a human brain. He announces that he is looking for a group dedicated to advancing the potential of N.OH. Before he can continue, a young woman in the back of the hall interrupts, questioning Kreutz's true motives for creating the machine. She concludes her brief speech by urging the students to wake up before leaving the hall. Jackson follows her and eventually catches up with her on the rooftop, where she stands at the edge. The next scene shifts to Agnes waking from a dream. Jackson is in the room with her and helps her up, sitting beside her to ask if she's okay. Maddie enters and sits next to Agnes, followed by Rollo. Soon after, Dylan arrives, holding pills in both hands. Maddie sharply tells Jackson to take Dylan out of the room, and Jackson complies. As Jackson and Dylan step into the hallway, Jackson hears someone call his name. Turning around, he sees the assessor standing a few meters away. They approach him, exchange greetings, and the assessor hands Jackson an envelope, telling him that the master has summoned him. Jackson, now in a suit, is picked up by a black car. Inside, he watches a video of his younger self explaining an experiment he conducted on rats. The car stops on a deserted street, and Jackson gets out. Mosca arrives to escort him down a dimly lit corridor towards a door. On their way, they pass 3 hooded figures. When they reach the door, it opens, and Mosca pushes Jackson inside. As the light comes on, Jackson realizes he's standing above a deep chasm. Looking down, he spots N.Chi and leans in for a closer look, fascinated. Standing up, he notices a cross on the wall in front of him. Kreutz's voice interrupts from behind, and Jackson turns to see Kreutz in his wheelchair, wearing a white jacket over black trousers. Kreutz reveals that he once served God when it suited him, and his current condition may be a punishment for that hypocrisy. He accuses Jackson of exploiting his team for personal gain, but Jackson denies it. Kreutz then offers to help Jackson achieve personal glory, in exchange for restoring Kreutz's body. In the following scene, Jackson is seen running in his suit towards a gate. He opens it, slams it shut, and turns around to find the woman who had challenged Kreutz in the lecture hall standing behind him. He imagines them in bed together, and also envisions her falling from a rooftop. This final vision jolts him back to reality, revealing that the woman isn't actually there. It was all an illusion or hallucination. Agnes is sitting on the floor, writing on sheets of paper with blood-red ink. Meanwhile, Maddie listens to Professor Marcus Deeks as he criticizes the biotags that the students received upon entering the academy. In his office, Jackson explains his latest experiment to Voltaire, showing how he used enoche to bring a maimed and dead rat back to life. Voltaire is visibly shocked by what he sees. Stella, the woman from Jackson's hallucinations, suddenly appears and interrupts with a question. Jackson, slightly irritated, tries to figure out who she is and why she's in the lab, but she sidesteps his questions with her own. She then informs him that Agnes is finished. Alarmed, Jackson rushes out of the lab. Meanwhile, Agnes drops her quill and heads toward the roof, putting on a small wing as she goes. As Jackson runs, Stella trips him, causing him to stumble and fall. Maddie arrives on the roof just as Agnes begins to fall, while Jackson watches helplessly from below. Agnes hits the concrete face first, leaving Maddie screaming and Jackson frozen in shock. The students later hold a candlelight vigil in Agnes's memory. Maddie, sobbing, enters Agnes's former room and suddenly feels a presence. Turning around, she sees Stella standing behind her, wearing Agnes's bathrobe. Maddie points this out, and Stella nonchalantly removes the robe and leaves as Maddie glares at her. Later, De Silva informs Jackson, Rollo, and Dylan that a new team member has been found. Describing her as highly brilliant, De Silva hopes that working in a group will help temper her. As the team sits quietly, Stella, with her legs on the table, sips coffee. Rollo reminds her that hot liquids aren't allowed in the lab. When he asks who she is, Stella replies that she's a nanotech quantum biologist. Rollo welcomes her to the team, and as she moves to stand in front of a monitor, the display suddenly changes, alarming Jackson, who rushes over to check it. Jackson demands to know what Stella did to the monitors, but she ignores him and walks away. Later, in their room, Rollo explains that Agnes's suicide was her final proof that we don't truly die. We continue to exist elsewhere. Jackson then accuses someone of tampering with his experiment, which enrages Rollo. He lashes out, frustrated that Jackson is more concerned about a rat experiment than Agnes's death. Dylan steps in to calm him, reminding everyone that people grieve differently. Meanwhile, Maddie is in her room, repeatedly reading a line from a religious book. Stella, on the other hand, leaves the campus and walks toward an old, dilapidated complex where strange characters use the space to practice dancing. The rest of the team, except for Maddie, follow her discreetly. As Stella stops, the dancers gather around her, and Voltaire, one of the dancers, is brought forward. Rollo and the others burst in, initially threatening the dancers to let Stella go, but Rollo quickly assesses the situation and calms down. Back at the lab, they bring Voltaire in, and Rollo questions how Voltaire can move his hand. It dawns on him that Stella must have used N.Oak, but he's puzzled about how she obtained the codes. Stella walks in, explaining that they all contributed to making it possible. At that moment, Maddie enters and questions if Agnes's death played a role in Stella joining the team. Maddie then removes her biotag, declares that the project must stop, and walks away. Voltaire argues that they can't stop now, as this is his only chance to regain his body and life. As Rollo and Dylan try to follow Maddie, Stella starts mimicking Voltaire's dance moves, shocking everyone. Rollo realizes that Stella and Voltaire are both connected to the network. Jackson accuses Stella of stealing the N.Oak codes, but she reveals that Kreutz invited her. Jackson grows frustrated that Kreutz gave Stella all his research, but Rollo counters that it's actually his research, which Jackson stole. He adds that sharing is part of friendship and asks Stella to connect him to the network, showing off a few moves. Dylan also agrees to be connected, and the two rush off to test their new abilities. They discuss the need for more people to help Voltaire regain full control of his body, and Voltaire suggests connecting his crew. Jackson, however, insists they don't have enough people. Rollo suggests connecting all the students, but Stella objects, saying someone needs to remain off the network to act as a control. She proposes that Jackson should take on that role, since that's what he's always wanted. Meanwhile, Mosca wakes Kreutz and attaches a biotag to him, causing Kreutz to have a vision of being in bed with Da Silva. Jackson goes to Maddie's door, trying to get her attention while listening to another video of Deeks. Maddie eventually comes to the door holding a large stick, and just as she's about to strike the door, Rollo calls Jackson's name and pulls him away, commenting that Jackson looks pale as a ghost. The students attend a ball celebrating their graduation from the academy, while Mosca prepares Kreutz. Rollo and Dylan start dancing together. Rollo contacts Jackson and tells him to begin. At the same moment, the assessor walks in. Their first subject is a girl named Minnie, who claims she doesn't know how to dance. Rollo convinces her to try, and through her connection to the network, she begins dancing effortlessly. Voltaire enters with his crew, and they all pick up biotags, placing them around their necks. Dylan stands at the turntable and urges everyone to get ready. He delivers a brief speech about uniting everyone in the hall, then counts down before jumping into the crowd on the count of 1. Everyone begins to dance in unison, while Voltaire and Kreutz gradually regain their mobility. Jackson notices that communications and scans are down. He tries to alert his friends, but they can't hear him. Voltaire regains full mobility and joins the dance. At the same time, Jackson sees a video of a little girl resembling Stella running up a staircase. The dancers have now exited the building and are standing on its steps, while Stella observes from a rooftop. Jackson spots Stella on his screen. Kreutz finally stands on his own, and Jackson notices a red figure among the dancers. It's Maddie. She steps forward and pulls down her hood. Rollo recognizes her, but is shocked by her appearance. She suddenly attacks him with a baseball bat, prompting Jackson to rush out of the lab. As he falls, Maddie snatches his biotag and puts it on her neck, causing chaos in the network. She proceeds to attack the other dancers and students, overpowering most of them until one manages to knock her out. Stella watches from her vantage point, showing concern when Maddie is taken down. Jackson eventually arrives, but is confronted by Da Silva, who accuses him of killing the students due to his ambition before fleeing. As she runs, the assessor ambushes her. Jackson rushes to help, and they engage in a fight. He ultimately overpowers the assessor and knocks him out before approaching the injured Da Silva. Her final words are, "It could have been so different. You could have been so different." Jackson stands among the fallen bodies of his friends and colleagues, spotting Stella in the distance. He continues to gaze at her until he's suddenly struck down by a black car. Stella mouths the words, "I'm sorry," as she walks away. She heads to the location where Enoch is stored and finds Mosca strapped to a bed. Kreutz enters and briefly discusses his struggle to control Enoch, claiming he has finally mastered it. Stella turns to face him, and as she looks at him, the lights go out and the door shuts. Slightly alarmed, Kreutz asks what's happening and who she is. A flashback reveals her as a little girl while he was a priest. In the present, Kreutz realizes she is Enoch. As she begins to fall back into the chasm, he tries to hold her back, but she disintegrates, leaving him holding nothing but thin air as he freezes in shock. The scene shifts to Kreutz delivering a lecture to the academy students, with Jackson and his team among the audience. Stella stands at the back of the hall. As he concludes his speech, Da Silva comes forward, and they hold hands while the students give Kreutz a standing ovation. Stella smiles and exits the hall. The next scene shows her at the abandoned building complex, where the structures disintegrate and begin to swirl around her. A vacuum forms in front of her, and a drop of blood falls from her eye into it. What do you think of this movie? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like and subscribe to catch new recaps as they're uploaded.